In this video, we're going to talk about working with Linux virtual guests via Vagrant. Vagrant from HashiCorp is a tool for managing multiple guest images on your workstation. It allows you to configure new guests easily and import the base images, as well as manage the guests over time. It can use a few different virtualization tools, but we're going to be looking at using Vagrant on top of VirtualBox. Virtual hosts are full system images running as guests on another host. They have their own operating systems and have access to the hardware of the host system, CPU, memory, network, as well as input devices and other hardware. For this lab, you will need administrator rights on your system so you can install software. If you haven't installed VirtualBox yet, go ahead and do that now. You don't have to import any images or start up the VirtualBox application. Once you have VirtualBox installed, you'll need to install Vagrant. Go to vagrantup.com on your web browser and click on the download button. Vagrant's available for several different operating systems, and you can choose the one that works best for you. When the image finishes downloading, find it in your downloads location and run the installer. Vagrant is a command line tool that uses text-based configurations. Unlike other virtualization tools that rely on graphical interfaces for configuration, Vagrant's configs are easy to share across team members and to keep updated or to store in version control. Vagrant can download and initialize new images for us, so we don't have to find them. It relies on a centralized library of virtual images on HashiCorp's Atlas repository. There are lots of boxes in Atlas. I can filter on the virtualization library and other things so I can find the ones that I want. So let's say I want VirtualBox and I want to find Ubuntu. You can see from the search results that some of the images have been downloaded millions of times. They've also maybe been updated very recently, or maybe not quite as recently as you'd like. This one last released 2 years ago. New boxes are added all the time by various people who maintain them. There may be different packages installed or different default configurations. The release cycle for all of these images is completely up to the people that maintain them. So you'll find that they're not all as up to date as they could be. Some maintainers publish them more often than others. When I select an image, I don't get a downloads page. I get a list of commands for how to work with this image, depending on the virtualization library that I'm using. So I'm going to use VirtualBox as my underlying library, and I have the instructions here for how to pull down this Ubuntu 14.04 image. And I'm going to give myself a workspace in a new directory. So I have a new empty directory called Ubuntu, and this is where I'm going to do my work. So I put in the command to download an image of Ubuntu 14.04 that's published by the Bento project. That's this part here. And I'm going to tell it to run using VirtualBox as its underlying library. So it's going to import the base box, which means it's going to download an image from the internet. If I don't already have the current image, it will download it, and then it's going to boot it. You can see in the little yellow message, I had an older version of this Ubuntu box, and if I wanted to update it, I can type vagrant box update, and that will download the new version, since the new version was just released recently. So let's take a look at what got dropped in this folder. I now have a Vagrant file, which is the piece of Vagrant's main configuration. So there's a lot of comments in here to sort of walk you through things that you can change. You see the main component here shows what the actual box name is. There's other stuff in here for the network. I can attach additional forwarded ports. I can share more folders from the laptop to the virtual guests operating system. And there's other things that can be put in here that some of them are optional and won't really matter for the things that we're going to do. So Vagrant init is what created this Vagrant file and put in the basic specifications. The other one's Vagrant up, and that actually allows the system to run. If I want to check the status of the host that is configured in this directory, I can type Vagrant status, and it tells me that it's running and it's using VirtualBox. If I want to shut it down, it tells me right here to stop it. I can run Vagrant halt to shut it down forcefully, or Vagrant suspend to simply suspend the machine. It saves all of its virtual memory out to disk and saves it in the current state. To log into this box, I can use a command called vagrant SSH, and that puts me right in as the Vagrant user. I'm logged directly into the host. Vagrant boxes are generally built with a couple of guidelines. The user account is always Vagrant. This account also has administrative privileges on the host so that it can access all of the commands needed to administer the system. Things like installing packages, making changes, adding more users, and whatever. This is done with passwordless sudo. Sudo is a tool that allows accounts on a Linux system to behave as if they were other accounts, in this case, the root account in particular. So now I have a host. That's all I really needed to do. I had VirtualBox, and I installed Vagrant, and then I used those commands that I found in Atlas. I can do whatever I want to on this system. I can install applications, I can test my own developed code if I want to, and when I'm done with the host, I can log out and turn it off. There are some additional helpful commands for working with Vagrant guests. I already showed you Vagrant status, so that tells me the current state of the host. When you're working with Vagrant and you have this Vagrant file, it's sort of a one-to-one relationship with a guest and a Vagrant file. So I have one Vagrant file, I have one guest that I can run from this local directory. If I want to be able to work with more than one Vagrant guest, I can put another Vagrant file in another directory. Sort of keep them separate, makes it much easier. Like I said earlier, if I want to stop it in its current state, I can use Vagrant suspend. If I want to officially sort of stop it like as a shutdown, I can use Vagrant halt. I can keep Vagrant boxes around for as long as they're useful to me. When I'm totally done with a particular box, I can get rid of it entirely using Vagrant destroy. This has an interesting behavior. It doesn't remove the original image that we downloaded, the box file. It only deletes the guest that we created from it. So if we look at my directory here now, I don't have any files in here, but if I want to start it again, I type Vagrant up. Because I haven't deleted that Vagrant file, I can still rebuild this box. You can see that I have lots of files in here that are necessary for this particular image. The original box we downloaded, it gets retained even if we destroy things, and those are stored in my home directory. I'll show them to you here. Home directory.vagrant.d, and then a subdirectory called boxes, and you can see all the ones that have been downloaded there. So you can keep these boxes around as long as you want to. You'll find that they age out. They're no longer the most recent copies or whatever, and you might want to clean them up. It's very easy to spend a lot of hard drive space on them if you're not paying attention to them. So it's a good idea to keep the old ones cleaned up out of this directory. Vagrant has some other tools as well, but they're dependent on the underlying virtualization platform that you're using. So I have VirtualBox here, and that means we can do some things with like snapshots and other commands that VirtualBox supports. Not all of the commands are supported in all guest types or with all the virtualization software, so you have to make sure that you check the Vagrant documentation if you want to learn more about some of the more sophisticated stuff about Vagrant. There's a good bit of stuff on Vagrant's website about how to work with the rest of what Vagrant can do. There's more options that can be put into the Vagrant file. There's other commands for the command line interface. Lots of other things that it can help you work on as you're working with virtual hosts.